Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to be putting together some information about my Intermatic T101R timer. Now I've already done some of the wiring, but I still wanted to make the video in case there was anyone interested in knowing how the wiring's done and overall how the unit works. Now the T101R, R meaning insulated weatherproof, so good for outside, is a 2 horsepower at 120 volt or a 5 horsepower at 240 volt with a maximum rating of 40 amp. It's a very robust timer, and the reason I needed to use such a bigger timer is because of my application. I'm going to be using it as a timer for both my above ground pool pump, which draws anywhere from 13 to 14 amp at startup, as well as my salt water system, which draws about 1.5 to 2 amps. Now, yes, the pump when running will be much lower amperage, probably half of its rating, if not even less. But you must always take into consideration max amperage draw when doing your wiring or any of these applications. So if we look at the timer, it has a clasp, lockable. You open it up, and here we have inside. On the left-hand side, you have a diagram letting you know how it works, the wiring diagram, which I find is not the greatest, so I will be putting a wiring diagram at the end for you guys to see. Now, the way it works, as we could see here on this particular model, we have 4 screws total. We have our ground. So if we look, we have our 120 volt supply coming in. That's from our breaker. We have our green ground screw. We have our neutral, which would be our white wire, which goes to screw A. We have our hot wire, our black wire, which goes to screw 1. Now, for the devices that we're powering, in my case there will be 2, but I'll be pigtailing the wiring together for the 2 devices. We'll have our ground for both sharing the ground screw. We'll have our 2 whites for our devices, pigtailed together, coming to our screw A, sharing the neutral. And our 2 blacks, our hot wires, pigtailed together, coming to screw 2. So that's how the timer works. As you can see, the hot on the coming from the breaker is on screw 1. The hots for the 2 devices are on screw 2. And our clock motor either opens or closes that circuit, thus turning on or off the device. If we look over here, we have the timer dial itself. We have the screws on the bottom. Now, normally there's a plastic insulator that covers that. I took that off for the video purposes. We have our white wire coming up to screw A neutral. Our black wire coming up to screw 1 hot. And our green wire coming for ground. Now, our device or devices would be coming up as well, the wiring, sharing white neutral, screw A. Black wire on devices, this time going to screw 2. And our grounds sharing our ground wire. Now, because this application for myself is greater than 15 amps, but less than 20, I had to size my wiring accordingly, and this is very important that you all have to do. Make sure your wiring is taking into consideration the amperage draw. So because my combined amperages will be greater than 15 but less than 20, I went with a 12 gauge wire, 12-3 wire, meaning it's a 12 gauge with 3 wires inside, our black, our white, our green, our neutral, our hot, our ground. I put about 2.5 feet of wire to give me room to plug it in. And this is another important factor. Because it's greater than 15 amps and less than 20, it takes a 20 amp plug. And that's what a 20 amp plug looks like. As you can see, it doesn't look like your normal plug. In this case, you have one vertical blade connector, you have one horizontal, and your ground. Whereas normally on a normal conventional 15 amp rated plug, you would have your 2 vertical blades. So that's what makes it a 20 amp. Therefore, this plug could only plug into a 20 amp receptacle. I'm going to be taking you guys outside after to see the application and showing you what a 20 amp receptacle looks like. So once again, that's very important. If you put this on a 15 amp plug, it would not be able to hold up to the amperage draw coming through. Now with this timer, you have multiple access holes for which you could bring your wiring in. So in this case, I have my clamp here. There's 1, 2 on the bottom. Both could be used either as a 3/8 or 3/4 hole, depending on the size of your wiring. I was able to use a 3/8 clamp connector. You have access on this one side, and as well on the other side as well. So you have a total of 4 areas where you could be running wire through. As far as your mounting, as you can see, you do have holes on the inside. 1, 2. The clock unit does remove from the box. You push down on this clamp, which releases it. It lifts up and will give you access to the 2 holes on the top where you could run your wiring, your screws as well, to mount it to a mounting surface. That would be more of a permanent way of mounting it. In my case, because I'll need to be removing it in the winter time to bring it inside, I will be mounting it a bit differently. I will be mounting it from the hanger up here, which you can hang it, and then putting the 2 screws at the bottom, which are easily accessible, so you can remove it in the winter. So now I'll be taking you guys outside so you can see the outside setup. Just wanted to show you also how the timer functions. If we look inside, we have 2 tabs, an on and an off. Now the unit does come with 2 of each, so 2 ons, 2 offs. Therefore you can have multiple time zones set up. So green is on, gold is off. So that'll indicate when devices come on, when devices go off. Arrow in the middle shows us what time it currently is. Now this lever over here is a manual override. Right now it's in the on position, so the timer would be controlling everything. Or we could bypass everything and shut everything off. By flipping that, all devices turn off. Now we're on the outside, and here we have our receptacles on the outside in a weatherproof box. Keeping in mind, rated for 20 amps, therefore a 12 gauge wire is running out underneath the patio and into the garage, where it runs directly to the breaker panel, where it's on its own 20 amp circuit. So now if we look in the box, now we could see what the 20 amp receptacle looks like. You see it's made for both 15 or 20 amp, and you can see a regular 15 amp cord plug will plug in there, the 2 vertical connectors, blades, but also the 20 amp, because on the left hand one it has the spot for the horizontal. So this plug could be used either for 15 or 20, and only a 20 amp plug could plug into that. Whereas if we look on this side, it's only rated for 15 amp and only a 15 amp could plug into. Now, before anyone says it, yes, you are allowed to have a 15 amp receptacle on a 20 amp line. The code states when you have more than 1 receptacle on a line, you could have one has to be a 20 amp. All other ones could be 15, mainly because receptacles are rated with a 20 amp pass through, so they can handle the 20 amp. If you were to have only 1 receptacle on this line, it would have to be the 20 amp, not a 15. So that's how it's set up there. So that's it for this video. Just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. Thank you very much.